Hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegraywolf.com. We've got a lot of prognosticating to do today, a lot of discussion about the future, so want to get right down into it. By the way, this video is going to be posted a little bit later than I normally do with the Weekly Wringer. My schedule kind of got in the way this week. I know you guys have always been very flexible and adaptable when the video comes out a little bit late, so you'll have to excuse me this week. But it's okay. We've got, here in the United States at least, we've got Thanksgiving week coming up, so there'll be plenty of time to make up for it in discussion for next week. So, what have we got to do today? We've got to wrap up the conversation from last week, which was about kind of the future of mobile/handheld gaming, as many of you said, specifically when it comes to Nintendo and Sony. There's a lot to parse out here. This could be a long one, guys, and I definitely want to take some time to really flesh this discussion out, because it's a great question. You guys had some great answers and some ideas, and I really want to kind of bounce those things off, and then, as I always do, I'll give you my opinion on the matter, and then we will move on to the question for next week, which is going to have some kind of Thanksgiving theme to it, although I won't get too granular. Let's just say we will focus in on a little geek TV. All right. Now, as I said last week, before I get into this, there was one comment that was made, and I wanted to do my kind of welcome for the new member / respond to the comment / try to figure out exactly what we're going to be doing with the Weekly Wringer moving forward. Habit BMX, first of all, welcome to the community. Great to hear from you. Sounds like you might have been watching and just commented now, but I wanted to say the question from Habit BMX was, can I produce this as an MP3 so that people can listen to it podcast style? So if any of you have that kind of interest, please let me know. You don't have to let me know on the, obviously on a Weekly Wringer post. You don't have to post there. You can just send me an email, Commodore128 at clanofthegraywolf.com, or you can just as easily send me a private message on the site using the site's private message software. If you'd like to have an MP3 of it, just let me know. Here's what I'm going to say. I have never intended this to be like a podcast as much as it is kind of a vlog or blog or vlog, right? And as many of you know, this kind of took the place of my blog, which was starting to get kind of time-consuming typing things up rather than just being able to consolidate all my thoughts into a video. Videos are more entertaining. I don't need to do the math for you guys. That's why this whole series really evolved. Now, if there is desire from enough people to get an MP3, then I will be glad to facilitate that and put an MP3 along with the Weekly Wringer every week. But what it really got me to think of was that we really need to fire up some more echo screens. That is part of my role here at Clan of the Grey Wolf, and I know that Rue and myself, we really need to get together and do some more echo screens so that we can offer something as a podcast. I really particularly liked when we did a live feed that produces nice, interesting challenges, but also allows you guys to interact with the podcast. And I always think that's the best way to go. So, so the answer is I'm not immediately going to post MP3s. However, if there is enough interest, if I hear from enough people, even if it's enough people over the course of the next couple weeks to post MP3s, I will gladly do so. I will do whatever the community needs me to do. I want to be able to have this content however you guys want to consume it. That's the name of the game. So I just wanted to start out with that. Now, let's get back into the question from last week. I asked you about the future of handheld, I guess mobile gaming is really how I put it. But as many of you came to the realization, I don't differentiate between mobile and handheld gaming. I think they are two different species of the same, of the same kind of animal, right? I mean, if you basically look, if you look at their form factors, if you look at their targeted audiences, and you look at their functionality, I think they're almost indistinguishable. The only reason that any of us, I think, pay a huge amount of time and energy to differentiation is because of a historical understanding of both technologies and not kind of an objective look at it at the moment. Anyway, I'm getting too much into my own personal theory and not enough sticking with you guys, but it's important to note right off the bat that you all basically came to the conclusion, several of you said this, I don't know if any of you came to the conclusion, but basically said this, that there are two different genres or species, right? We've got the mobile world with smartphones and other kinds of phones with games on them, so on and so forth, among many apps that they have. And then you have very gaming-centric, gaming-specific handhelds, a la the 3DS and the PSP, or the PlayStation Vita, which is also debuting from Sony fairly soon. So, so many of you made that differentiation. You said, well, listen, your question doesn't really resonate with me because I don't clearly understand exactly where the line gets drawn, and that, the future of Sony and Nintendo as a part of this market appears to be diminishing pretty heavily. And that was really why I wanted to ask you guys, what can those companies do to really answer that question, to respond to the demand and to do whatever it takes to make up ground. Now, let's get into some of the comments. And I think, first of all, I want to say it was a great discussion, and many of you posted comments that were very, very long but very insightful and had a lot of different ideas in it. So I've done my best to try to limit that stuff down to a few discernible chunks, right? So if I cut out one of your big ideas, it's not because I didn't attribute that big idea to you, it's just because, I have a lot of stuff to consolidate down to in a lot of comments. So, and I wanted to get down to the nitty-gritty, as I always do here on the Weekly Wringer. So, here, let me just dive into it after I get a sip of coffee. All right. Now, first of all, Shirao Wolf, a lot to say on the topic, and I thought there was plenty of good comments to go around from a lot of people. Starting out with the idea that Nintendo doesn't have a future in at least the way that we've asked the question about being part of the mobile gaming market rather than the handheld gaming market. And I think that's absolutely true. Highlighted really the difference between mobile and handheld, which got us all kind of kicking on that vein of thought, so I appreciate that. And then asked an interesting question, which is, have we reached a stalemate in terms of the handheld gaming market? And have we reached kind of a stalemate between the major players? Now, I could just jump right into my own explanation from that and just start going off on my own thoughts as to where it works. But let's unpack this a little bit. First of all, I think Nintendo has thus far, and several of you talked about this, including Prangerade, Chris Pranger, several of you mentioned the concept that that Nintendo has a tendency to play with what works and kind of refresh the status quo than to really try to change the game, as it were, no pun intended, especially when it comes to mobile gaming. They really built this genre. They built this specific beast to be what it is today. So I think they really feel like they can't do much wrong in it, and as long as they keep following that path, they'll be fine. So the answer is, I don't think they're going to move into the mobile gaming market, and I don't think they have any interest in doing so. Several of you came up with some ideas I thought were interesting. And remember, it was only about 2 years ago that people were speculating that Apple would be buying that Apple will be buying Nintendo. Apple will be buying Apple. That Nintendo would be a particularly interesting acquisition target for Apple. And one of the reasons why, I think, is because there was the thought that Apple was going to be spending a lot of time thinking about how gaming was formulated on their platforms. That seems silly now, looking back on it. It really does. It seems very silly, but at the time I know that several of us really thought that would be something that was potentially going to happen. Now, as to the question about the stalemate, you know, this is going to be a part of one of the major threads I want you guys to think about as we talk about this today. These folks, we have to realize right now, this represents a market, right? We're talking about mobile gaming as a market that has technology behind it, high technology, a constantly changing demographic, and a continuously changing landscape of technological deployment, over the air, wireless, you know, the cloud kind of concepts, which several of you also talked about. I think, and again, this is only just to talk, to give you maybe a little bit of something to think about as we continue the discussion, and give you a little bit of forewarning as to what my thoughts are. But I think stalemate is exactly the opposite of where we are right now. Stalemate isn't even close, because this is a market that stalemate will not, the market will not tolerate stalemate. And I think that's been demonstrated many, many, many times over the course of many years now. And I think we are at the cusp of a big movement that, which is exactly what I highlight to be able to ask the question to begin with. All right, moving on. Estolia. Nintendo is relying on the success of previous platforms, which I thought was a great point why I wanted to bring it out. You know, I've already talked about this a little bit. They do really kind of come to redefine the status quo, but Estolia posed this in a very interesting way. Think about the terms of success that Nintendo's having today that is still based on the success that they had in 1987, right, or 1989, or 1990, or 1991, right? It doesn't take a lot of imagination to realize that much of Nintendo's success today still really relies on a lot of nostalgia and a lot of continued patronage from folks that have some kind of memory of those gaming platforms. Whether you were alive then or not is irrelevant. You know, you have those particular memories in mind and remember playing those things, and so you want to recreate those memories into the future. This is why Nintendo was so kind of averse to the entire emulation scene as it developed. I particularly know in the mid-90s and then into the late 90s, where there were, you know, emulation platforms like SNES 9X were just popping up everywhere, and Nintendo was trying to do everything it could to shut them down. And now it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense because Nintendo knew that they were moving into a place where they would be able to repackage and resell those games, and to do it in a way that could satisfy that crowd with while still being able to realize money from them. And I'll be honest with you guys, it definitely makes sense. In a similar way to how music piracy has waned with iTunes and the success of iTunes, and look at just something like iTunes Match or Google Music for proof of this. People are interested in buying content, even stuff that they don't have a great grasp on in today's market, but had a great grasp on 20 years ago and had a great following then. They can repackage it in great ways, either with a really high quality version that's seamless, that works wonderfully, or it's got some repackaging to it that just make it more fun, or it's got some additional content that help you kind of geek out or put some nostalgia into it. The point is, folks, I think those two things mirror each other, and it's no coincidence, and by that I mean the music industry, the gaming industry are kind of mirroring each other in that regard, and I don't think it's a mistake or a coincidence that Apple is at the forefront of the complete restructuring of the music industry, and we're talking about platforms in mobility that Apple helped to define. Many would argue they actually did define it. They are the architects of it. So, I mean, I'm not trying to float conspiracy theories here. That's not at all what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that there is a huge coincidence between the fact that we are willing to consume old, ancient, if you think of it in technology terms, ancient video games on brand new platforms because of the kind of restructured market of it, because of the way that companies can really ride that wave, and Nintendo continues to do that. And I think that really does mirror the music industry, and the success that's been had there is tremendous. And now you have the industry as a whole that is really plugging into that trend. And I think you're seeing the same thing happen here in video games as well. Estolia also mentioned the cloud, and I thought